There is another, I don't want to call it a movement. It's been going on for a long time, but is the idea of toxic charity. And that's part of
Hmm.
what I was saying is that Western Christian charity has a tendency to go and volunteer and give because it makes me feel good. And it can put a person in need in a place of dependency, even entitlement. And so we're really looking at other program as to where can we change some of that and be more of teach them how to fish rather than hand them a fish.
Hey, Summit Chasers, you are listening to Voices of Impact, the podcast where you broaden your awareness to the various issues across the globe, learn about the amazing people who are working to solve them, and get inspired to chase your own summit with actionable strategies. It starts right now. Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining me today on Voices of Impact.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Adriana.
You too. So talk to me about you, who you are, and what it is that you're working on at Streetwise.
At Streetwise, well, I'm Tracy Joseph. I'm the executive director and CEO of Streetwise Georgia. We are a nonprofit in Lawrenceville, Georgia. That the best explanation is that we really are striving to be the safety net for our most vulnerable neighbors, and we work to be that by providing emergency and long-term resources that will help a family become stable and self-sufficient. Our main focus and distribution is food. Last year we were able and blessed to serve 33,000 people. We have a number of different distributions so that we can aim at different demographics, if you will, as far as age and economy. We have programs designed for seniors and for widows. We have programs specifically designed for working families so they don't have to leave work to come and get resources that will help stabilize them and keep them in their homes. So on a grand scheme, we're doing everything that we can with food, clothing, hygiene, counseling, programming that helps a family or an individual become stable and self-sufficient.
I love it. And we had a really great conversation when we were in Georgia and had the pleasure of going through your facility, and the way that you guys have been able to expand over the years and the different programs that you have in place are so incredible. And I think kind of differentiate you in the space and how you've set up Streetwise to run. So I'm going to rewind us just a touch. Can you, before we dive into that, can you talk to us about your background and how you became the director and CEO at Streetwise?
A pathway I never saw coming. um, I had met the founder a number of years ago, liked what was going on. And so I was a volunteer for a monthly Saturday event where we serve families. In 2019, he had finally convinced me to join the board of directors. And then sadly, in February of 2020, Terry Powell, our founder, passed away. And roughly a week later, the world shut down with COVID. And so the five of us that were on the board at the time went immediately from being an advisory board to an operating board and literally learning what we did not know. Streetwise was relatively siloed uh, by design and preference of the founder. And serving a tremendous amount of people. But we went through huge transitions of losing a founder. There was no clear transition mechanisms in place, and COVID, and keeping the doors open so that we could continue to feed people. When October hit, the short version of the story is that I go away every year, and I have since I was in my teens, and I work on my goals and assessments, and I kind of go off grid, and I spend a few days working on goals for the next year, assessing what happened the year before. And I'm a man of faith. God would not let me go and leave me alone. And normally I come home with 8 or 10 pages of notes and goals. And I came at the end of that weekend with one line on one page that says, now I have to come back next weekend. And I did, and thinking, okay, we'll get to work, we'll get this done. And the same thing happened. God just had other plans. And after arguing with him throughout the weekend, I lost. And I had one line on one piece of paper, and it says, now I've got to call Alex, who was the chairman of the board at the time. And so I called, and we started the discussion, met with the board, informally stepped in November of 2020, and publicly in January of 2021 as the CEO and executive director. My background has mostly been the owner and designer for a number of design, build, and historical renovation companies across the country. So it had nothing to do with nonprofit. It had nothing to do with food. And yet, in the rearview mirror, I can see a lot of places where what I was doing, or what I went through, or what I endured, or what I celebrated, all became a part of what was necessary in order to step into this role.
That's incredible. That you just touch on so many things that I want to dive into. I think where I want to start though is those transferable skills, because you just said that you went through so much when you were working in design and renovation and all of that, that now you're realizing has set you up to be incredibly successful in your role at Streetwise. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys navigated that transition through COVID and making sure that you could keep the doors open after just losing the founder and you stepping into this role.
It's a great question. I think it's twofold. The board worked very hard. The five of us worked very hard to learn what we didn't know and what may have been missing in Streetwise that allowed it to function as an organization more than a founder oriented or even a mom and pop type mentality. Our goal was to deal with the legalities that needed to be dealt with. Everything from transitions that take place in banking or with Secretary of State and Attorney Generals and so forth as to the legalities of an organization. We interestingly enough, COVID may have saved, or certainly been a huge part of saving Streetwise, and of course with God's help, is that organizations and the government was throwing money at food banks. People were desperate. And so the money that was coming in allowed us to re-strengthen the finances of Streetwise to where we could stay afloat, and then begin to look at how we functioned organizationally. For me, I think what a lot of it is having multiple companies all my life, being in construction and design, and maybe more specifically with the historical properties, was you learn very quickly that number one, you can't see what's behind the wall. And so when you open it, you've got to be ready to deal with what is there, and be open-minded and flexible and nimble to be able to shift gears or shift focuses. The other is to deal with priorities and prioritize everything when you've got a transition like that is important. A lot of things we think become urgent, but there really is levels of all of that. And
Right.
I think the ability to be able to kind of look through and break down what we need to take care of one step at a time. There's an old saying is, how do you walk across the country? One step at a time. And that's kind of what I've learned over those years is, what's the next right step to do to move us forward as an organization and to solidify the organization itself. And then the other side, quite honestly, Adriana, is I think it's how I'm built, is to be visionary. So I can look past the fear and dread of the moment to know that this too shall pass, with some hard work and some concentration, and don't give up.
I love that. I love that analogy. I mean, for you, it wasn't an analogy because you were literally knocking down walls and you're like, hey, we don't know what's behind this wall. But I think to take that and apply that into business and into an organization is really, really smart. Of like, okay, let's peel back these layers and find out what the actual issue is, and then adapt to it, pivot if we need to pivot, and identify, like you said, what's that next step that I need to take to move us in the right direction. So I absolutely love that. You have talked a lot about what you guys have built at Streetwise being different than some of the other organizations around you who are set up in the food space. Can we dive into how you guys have kind of differentiated yourselves, and also how you are? I feel like when you and I spoke, you guys are almost working to try to solve the root cause of the problem rather than the symptoms of the problem. So, can you dive into how you guys have set that up?
Sure. And I'll try to keep the short version. The, I guess, kind of even coming at from a slightly different angle for a minute, is in when President Eisenhower started the war on poverty and started the different programming at a governmental federal level, there was a percentage, and I don't have that number in front of me, but there was a percentage of those that were deemed to be in poverty. And here we are 60 some years later, and trillions and trillions of dollars later, and we're actually 2% worse than we were 60 years later. That tells me that we're not addressing the root. We're addressing symptoms, but we're not trying to heal them. And so part of what we look at Streetwise, and part of it is, it goes back to our mission statement, is that we want to provide the necessary emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual tools where we can help a person change their environment and then bring them from a place of dependency into stability and self-sufficiency. But you've got to look at the entire human. It's got to be body, soul, and spirit. And while organizations are doing a fantastic job, and I'm not knocking a soul for those that are meeting the immediate need for a person, because there is nothing that gets your attention quicker than an empty belly. Whether that's a student trying to study, a senior trying to survive, someone that is skipping meals so their kids can eat, but they're still at work. That distraction is just a level of dysfunction that is almost insurmountable. But what we started looking at is, if we give a box of food or two boxes of food, and it's not relational, number one, and it's just open the trunk, put it in, bless you, and maybe see you in a day or two, that person is looking for the next box of food in a day or two, and then a box of food, and then a box of food, and that goes on and on. And that anxiety and that fear never gets to subside. And so our philosophy on it is, if we can provide distributions that have a tremendous amount of food and supplies available to a family, and we can make a very legitimate dent in their budget. So two of our distributions, a family's going to get roughly $700 worth of groceries, meat, wow, produce, dairy, deli, bakery, water, cleaning supplies, hygiene supplies. That builds a $700 immediate bandwidth into their budget. And our hope, through other programming and wraparound resources that teach them about financial literacy and grief care and things like this, that $700 dent becomes where they'll spend it and pay their rent or their mortgage and not become homeless. If they become homeless and they don't have family nearby, they may never exit homeless. Right. Maybe it's a car payment or car repair, because at least in Atlanta, if you don't have a car, you can't get to work. Maybe it's childcare or a medical bill, and it brings a relief. And the other side of that is the pause that it allows that family to realize, I'm okay. We've got what we need for a period of time. It doesn't cover our entire groceries, but now we have some stability, and perhaps and hopefully they will then be able to handle and look at other challenges with a clearer mind, with a freer spirit, and hopefully wiser decisions. That's one side of it, and that's where all of our program is. The other is the relational part. We're not simply going to put a box in your trunk. Every single distribution we have has face-to-face time with trained volunteers that are checking on you. They're making sure you're okay, that you've got what you need. Are there other resources that we can refer to you in the realm of wraparound resources? Are they anything from addiction or homelessness or grief care or widow care? And it goes well beyond that. that being a Christian organization, we're going to offer to pray for them. If they allow, we're going to pray for them, because if nothing else, that tells someone's wanting to be intimately involved in my care, and someone I don't know showed up and is caring for me. And what that does for their morale and their dignity and their faith is healing.
Mm-hmm.
On a third prong of this that I think you might have been referring to is also what we're working very hard on, is creating a coalition, if you will, of partners in the region. We have worked very hard to assemble a group of partners in two directions. One is those that are wraparound partners that are experts in their field. They're counselors, they're medical, they're addictive, they're recovery programs, things like that, that will get someone really detailed expertise to help them, more than if we tried to keep it in-house. The other side that I'm particularly proud of is the alliances and the partnerships that we've developed with other nonprofits. So as of 2024, we're now up to just under 60 nonprofit partners that we're able to share of the abundance that flows through Streetwise. Last year, we were able to share roughly 300,000 pounds with other nonprofits. And that's things that immediately helps their budget, and they can help their programming maybe expand somewhere. It allows us to touch other people, other families we never would have met, never have known, and allow that to expand. And then the other side of that coalition is that we can partner together on programming or grants or events, and bring a whole network of people together that we know and trust and refer to, that if we pass someone to Positive Impact, we know that they're going to take care of those kids that are unhoused, may have been abandoned, may have been thrown out of the house. If we do something with Let 'em Eat and Chef Hank, we know that those are resources, particularly meat, that he uses to go out and then serve the 30 or 40,000 hot meals that he produced for the homeless last year. I hope that answered what you were thinking.
Yeah, it absolutely did. There's so much in there, I think, that you guys have really thought through too, in making sure that you are a full service. And I love what you said closer to the beginning, where you're like, we're focusing on the human, mind, body, and soul, and like filling them in so many different ways and helping them to recover using your partnerships that you've created. I think that that's so smart to be able, because your goal, I know when we spoke, your goal is that maybe they need your services of that $700 a month for 2 to 3 months, but then that's enough time for them to then get on their feet, to have maybe cleared up some of that debt, and now they no longer need your services. And that's how you guys know that you're doing the right thing and that you're making that impact, because you, like you said at the beginning, it's not just about giving that person a box to last them 2 days and then they're back, or they're looking for the next box. It's how do we actually set these people up to break the cycle that they're in.
Right.
And that's, I think, something that you guys have been able to do through those partnerships, and just through looking at it maybe through a slightly different lens than meeting that immediate need, which, like you said, it's absolutely needed. That immediate need has to be met, but then to actually take the time to say, okay, what can we do to try to break the cycle for that person is really, really neat.
That's absolutely right. And we do know that there will be a lot of people that will never be able to break that cycle. They may be seniors and they have medical issues, or seniors that have, now they're raising the grandkids, people, generational poverty, that requires a literal neurological rewiring. That takes a long time and choice. So we do know that there's people that will serve for a long time. We believe we're called in our Christian ministry to do so, to care for the poor. And we will do so, but do so with the same level of dignity and the same level of programming, that every little piece that we can do kind of goes back to the how do you walk across the country, one bite at a time. If we can make some inroads with them each time they're here, even if that's simply revealing and enhancing their dignity, they're on the road to recovery.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I know that we've talked a lot about the food aspect of it, but when we went through the facility when we were there, you guys have actually expanded to so much more. So tell us about the other services that you offer and kind of what that flow looks like. If somebody is in Lawrenceville or in Gwinnett County and they need help, what does the process actually look like and what other things are available to them?
Sure. If someone is in need, they can find us a lot of different ways. Many of them are referred by different organizations, either within Gwinnett County, churches, other centers, other partners that we have. We have grown to the size and the level that if you Google food insecurity in Gwinnett County, we're the first on the list that's going to come up.
Hmm.
So clients can find us in many, many ways. They go to our website and make an appointment. Everything we do, which is also unique, everything that we do, every distribution requires a reservation, an appointment. And the reason is that we want to make sure that we've built in the time so that we have literal eyeball time with each and every person that comes to a distribution. And that can range from 5 to 10 minutes on the low side to as high as 30 to 45 minutes for certain distributions, certain vetting processes that they'll do. Other places that we've expanded into, food is certainly our largest. Last year, we were blessed to serve 33,000 people at Streetwise. We also do a tremendous amount with clothing and do programming as a part of certain appointments. When they're here, they can go and choose clothing. We do a lot for the teens that's specific for their clothing needs. We'll do things, for instance, in July for Back to School Day, we'll combine a backpack giveaway where they can get a backpack and then purchase for
Mhm.
pennies on the dollar certain school supplies. They can also go and get school clothes. We have warm clothing in January where it's really, really cold. And so it's a focus on that for a whole family. So a lot with clothing. Hygiene supplies. We do a lot with feminine products and hygiene because those are crazy expensive.
Mhm.
We've expanded into pet food for seniors because very often the companion for a senior is their pet. And if they can't afford it and they have to give that pet away, they give away their companion. And that's
Mhm.
devastating to their mental and emotional health.
Right.
A lot of things that we're starting to gear and grow into is culturally relevant foods for the populations that are growing in our area, both Asian and Hispanic, where that is growing into foods that appeal to them and makes it easier for them to be able to get food and not have to just figure out what do I do with this thing I've never seen in my life or with these ingredients that are American. We have programming there that also includes teaching classes to teach them how to cook what we give them in their culture.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. One of my favorite things about the shops that you guys have set up is that a lot of what you guys are working towards is to kind of allow people to make the choices, feel like they've got their own dignity and they can go in there and shop just as anybody else. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that process and what that looks like for people who are coming in.
That's a great question. COVID drove everybody outside. We never had to close the doors, but we did had to take everything to a curbside, more safe process. And as COVID was winding down, it was really bothering us that that client choice had disappeared. So we started as a test, and it worked so well that we're actually doubling the footprint right now. Is a place we called Farmers Market, but what I call dignity shopping, and the clothing is the same. Our Christmas store is very similar. The whole idea is to provide a place where a parent and a family can come and choose what their family needs and wants. The food that we give on our bigger distributions, we choose a good part of that because it's what's coming out of our inventory in order to prepare it and box it ahead of time. We kind of have to do that, but then we have more of it available in the market where a family can choose. But you touched on it. It's all about dignity. When you're allowed to choose what is right for you or your family, and nobody's putting a limit on you, nobody's telling you you can only have this. It humanizes it, number one. And it goes back to what I shared a moment ago, is that our goal is to identify and enhance that dignity anywhere and everywhere that we can. And
Right.
when that person is allowed to come in and shop and not have to worry about, do I have the money to pay for it? Is somebody going to judge me for this? Is somebody going to tell me no, because they're told that a lot? Um, they walk out a different person, and they're encouraged, and they're anxious to build on what they have. And that's the stories that we love hearing the most, is that you gave me the opportunity to re-engage with a normal life.
Right. Right. I think one of the things that I remembered when we were speaking that just kind of stuck with me is how you actually came to that idea, though. And I think, if I remember correctly, it started with your Christmas shop, because you guys initially would package Christmas gifts for these families, which is such a beautiful thing. And you would give them to the parents and say, here are the Christmas presents for your family, based off of the kids and some of their ideas, maybe, and their needs. So then go ahead, fill in the rest of the story of how it came to be, how you guys have it set up now, which I want to highlight is the awareness thing that we were talking about earlier, and just being able to be adaptable and pivot when you need to set things up in a better way. I absolutely love this example.
Well, thank you. It we had been doing it for years, before I've been involved with Streetwise, and the best of intentions was that we didn't want to see a child go through Christmas
Mm-hmm.
without a present, and we combined it with what we call mobile food pantry, which just means they drive around our building. We're not delivering, but we'll serve 270, 300 families in 2.5 hours at that event. And at Christmas, we combined it with giving the Christmas presents. So a family that was going to be there would have their appointment. They told us the ages and the gender of their kids, and we would have these presents. We had an amazing group of partners that would provide, and we would wrap these and stage these, and they would go through, and our volunteers, along with other programming to make it very festive and Christmas and all those type of things. But we actually gave the presents to the kids through the windows of the cars. It's a moving distribution, and it was wonderful. We were able to serve thousands and thousands of kids a Christmas present. But 2 years ago, I decided that's a place I wanted to work for that event, and was watching it and was excited, and see the kids and their faces and the smiles, and oh man, it just makes you feel great.
Yeah.
There's one problem, is it made me feel great.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was listening to kids say, hey, mom, dad, Streetwise is my Christmas. Streetwise is Santa. And then I started seeing the faces of these parents, and just watched their countenance drop, their heads physically drop, and realized we made a mistake. Great intentions, but by providing for the children, we were destroying the dignity of the family.
Yeah.
So we stopped, and we went out and did a lot of research, and learned from some mentors, and did what we decided would be a Christmas store. A family still makes an appointment, and that parent, they can't bring their kids. We're going to grow into it where there'll be kids programs, but first year, they come and shop and choose, and everything is unwrapped. And we had a very large room that we were able to stage it in. It looked like the North Pole. It was gorgeous. It was just
Yeah.
so festive. But what was amazing was a parent got to come in and choose for that child. What did that child, that age, that gender want? What did they want their child to have? Because that was the other problem with what we were giving them, is we were choosing. That parent may not have believed or wanted it. We were very cautious, by the way, but nonetheless. And then the difference with this Christmas store also is there is a charge. The parents pay for the gifts, except it's a quarter, $1, $5, $10 for a brand new gift. Like the huge Lego boxes, right, that are $100 at the stores, were $10 or $20. And so a family had two things. They got to choose, and they got to provide. And what that did for their dignity and their hope and their faith to be able to say, Christmas was on me. And huge benefit to a family. And the stories we've heard of what that did for the families, what it did for them to be able to have the joy of watching that child open the present. Because we were also, through partners, able to give away some wrapping paper and things like that to help with some of those costs. But it's another place where we didn't replace Christmas for a family, but with that activity, we were able to enhance it and allow them to get to a place of stability. But more importantly, the dignity of that family was enhanced. And now we're going to do the same thing with our book bag event.
Yeah.
This year we're changing it. We used to give away a full backpack with everything under the sun that Gwinnett County wanted. We're changing that. We're going to provide the backpack, but we're setting up a store where the school supplies will they can come in and shop for them, and there'll be a charge for that. Again, a quarter dollar, pennies on
Right.
the dollar, but they get to choose and they get to provide.
Yeah, and that I love what you said there because you looked at yourself and you're like, this is not about me. Like, when you were talking about giving the kids the presents and you felt so good. But for you to have the awareness and the self-reflection to be like, wait, we're not doing this right. This isn't about me and how I feel. It's about how the people that we're serving feel. And if they're feeling like we are missing the mark on it, or like we're taking something away from them and their family, we need to flip the script and make sure that we set it up to benefit them. So I think that that is so, so cool to be able to, one, recognize it, but then two, to be agile enough and creative enough to say, okay, how can we do this to set this up where they have ownership over their child and the gifts at Christmas,
Mm.
and being able to make things special for them on their own accord. And yes, it's massively discounted, but for them to be able to go in and feel like they've done this, they've been the one to provide, they've used their money that they've worked really hard for to provide for their children, goes so, so far. I think, like you said, in the dignity, but also in building confidence that
Mm.
I can do this. And
Right.
if I continue to work through the process that you guys have set up, I'll be able to be in an even better spot next year and be able to provide even further. So I think that
Yeah.
that is also really huge. And just allowing people, like we said, addressing the root cause rather than just those symptoms.
Right.
So I think a lot of times when people end up in a cycle or in this system where they're leaning into the various resources that are available to them, like you said, it takes away their dignity, it takes away their confidence, it takes away their pride. So being
Mm.
able to give that back to them in any capacity, I think, is huge.
Sure is. Sure is. There is another, I don't want to call it a movement, it's been going on for a long time, but is the idea of toxic charity. And that's part of
Mm-hmm.
what I was saying, is that Western Christian charity has a tendency to go and volunteer and give because it makes me feel good. And it can put a person in need in a place of dependency, even entitlement. And so we're really looking at other program as to where can we change some of that and be more of teach them how to fish rather than hand them a fish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And we had talked a little bit about that, the toxic charity side. Can you explain that further? And like you already mentioned how you guys are working to not fall into that, but talk to me a little bit about that and what you've seen around the toxic charity piece.
It's a big deal, but it's a sensitive deal to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we've all been raised for a long, long time. Um, Part of that is a governmental issue. Is that there's no strings really attached to some of the programming, so we all kind of thought that's the way it had to be. You can't ask somebody to somehow be involved in their own um, growth. And so the idea behind two books that I've read, at least, and I know there's others out there, one is called Toxic Charity, the other is called When Helping Hurts, is it's making you think at your choices and reasoning for giving, and how does that affect the recipient?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of great ways, and our partners have been fantastic. We were very upfront. I filmed a video in the summertime and said, all of you that have given the toys over the years and volunteered, this is the change we're making, and this is going to be a big shift. Are you still on board? 100% of them were. They
That's
loved the
amazing.
idea because it made sense to them that it wasn't about how much we were going to charge. We didn't care about making money.
Right.
It provided dignity. And so that's the mindset that thought process of toxic charity is that if someone gets into a program or series of programs or a state of life for too long, there's these different steps and you become dependent, and then you can become expectant, and then you get to the highest level where you just believe you're entitled. You're going to
Right.
give me my Christmas presents this year, right?
Mm.
Or when do I come get my Christmas presents? That's an indication of when you've bred an entitled person, and
Yeah.
they may never be able to step away, and we were part of the cause.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal is, where can we incrementally make those changes to add programming that has the teaching facet of it, the skin in the game facet of it, where we can.
Yeah.
We have some contractual uh, agreements where we're not allowed to do that in certain distributions. So we're looking at other ways that we can make sure that we're building their dignity, and we're building their belief that I have options and
Mm-hmm.
I can change where I'm at.
Yeah. It's about, at the end of the day, I think empowering people
Mm.
to kind of take their life into their own hands when
Yes,
they're able to. Obviously, like we talked about at the beginning, there are going to be many cases where it's not going to be an option,
sure.
whether that be the generational side of things, or maybe it's mental health, or whatever it might be. There are absolutely cases where they're always going to need the resources, and that's absolutely fine. But I think where you can, being able to empower people as much as possible to kind of take control, right, of their life and their
Right.
destiny again, and to feel empowered to be able to do that, to be able to provide whatever it might be, I think is huge. um, one other thing, couple other things that I want to touch on. When you spoke about the coalition that you guys have kind of created within Gwinnett County and other nonprofits, I know when working with Tammy, sorry, and Positive Impact, combine
Uh-huh.
those two words. Which, if you guys want to listen to Tammy's episode, she's fantastic. It is on YouTube and Spotify and
She
Apple.
always is. She's hot. She's
Yep.
amazing.
She's great. But she was really talking about the group that you guys are building. And I think that that's such a unique thing. I don't know that that is typical within the nonprofit space, to really band together and see,
Mm.
okay, we service these people, you service these people. How can we bolster our services together to be able to make an even bigger impact? So touch on a little bit of that and how that came about, and then what the benefits you guys have seen from being able to do that.
Sure. Part of it came from my inexperience and lack of knowledge of the nonprofit world.
Okay.
So not knowing what was expected of me,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing the resistance to coalitions and partnerships, um, I just, I guess, started bulldogging it, is what I've been told. But how we really did it is I just kept inviting people to Streetwise. We've been
Okay.
blessed with an amazing building. We had an angel investor purchase the building for us in 2018. We have 20,000 square feet of space, which is really unique in the arena. It is an attraction and allows me to make invitations that people will take up if it means they can get in the building.
Right.
Just being fully transparent.
Right.
Um, and that started the conversations, because then we would have a lot of brainstorms or kind of director meet and greets, and my questions always were, why can't we work together? If
Right.
we have excess, why can we not share it and grow together and strengthen each person, each group? If our goal on a very simplistic level is we want to serve people, we want to help those in need, can we not do so better combined rather
Mm-hmm.
than duplicating certain things or staying siloed? So part of it was probably my being naive to the arena.
Yeah.
And yet, I think just being bold enough to say, this doesn't fit, so let's try something else.
Yeah.
And it's starting to work. COVID, I think, also created an open door for that, because we lost a lot of agencies that as standalones couldn't survive it. Those that made it through did suffer and are trying to grow and build. And so they are realizing that together we have real strength and we can do more. Where Tammy and I are working on things and kind of a core group of people is we're looking at it as who are the ones that are very commonly working together to solve a family's problem. Who is
Mm-hmm.
it that when we have a, a situation seem to all be at the table or on the phone call or at the Zoom meeting? Who's this group? Why don't we start right there as a nucleus and start to build that group of people and just,
Yeah.
if nothing else, say we'll handle it. And if you want to join in later and you've got the resources and the experience
Great.
and I think the state of mind to do so with a collaborative mindset, come on board. And so
Yeah.
that's really what we're looking at is, okay, we've got enough people in a nucleus that we can really help a family almost from a 360-degree view. And that's
Right.
what we're attacking. And um, we're being called disruptors. So
I
be it.
love it.
So be it. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Absolutely. And I think another part to that, which I could be wrong, but I would imagine you guys kind of banding together and being able to service a family from start to finish, A to Z, whatever it might be, to me would be far more appealing to investors too,
Hmm.
to people who want to support, because they're like, okay, sometimes when you hear like the numbers of how many people need this service or how many people need this service, it can feel incredibly overwhelming to
Right.
say, okay, well, if I give money, how much of an impact is it really going to make? But when you guys are coming together and you're like, hey, within our coalition, within our group, we can take a family from A to Z and essentially try like heck to break that cycle, or we have a 95% success rate of breaking this cycle now because we are all working together. That's got to be far more appealing to people who are providing the funds and donating and things like that. So I think that that's
I
really
think you're
smart.
really right. I do. I agree with you on that. I think certainly funders, a lot of the grant holders
Mm-hmm.
are beginning to look more favorably on partnerships and collaborations, because, as you said, certain things we can't measure. Even at Streetwise, we can't. I can't give you a quantifiable number of how many people are graduating out of Streetwise because they
Mm-hmm.
just quit coming. They don't call
Right.
us and say, "I'm good,
Yeah.
thank you," and we
Right.
don't see that. So what we can do when you've got a partnership like that is you can describe to a donor, a contributor, or a partner that this family entered here, and maybe it was at Streetwise, and we were able to stabilize them enough and remove the food insecurity part of it that help them stay in their home, or maybe they are partly homeless. We can hand off to Tammy or some of the other agencies. They get them. They have medical issues, mental health issues, and we literally can somewhat track that family and their growth. And then we can share that. And people then realize what I donated did have an end result that was measurable and it was good. That family is self sufficient.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what you said, like you guys are being looked at as disruptors, I think is a good thing to call out here is don't be afraid to do things differently. I think that's kind of been a recurring theme throughout our conversation, right? From the beginning all the way up to now is you have made it a priority with your board and with your team to do things differently at Streetwise. And it's paid off immensely with the amount of people that you guys have been able to help, with how you've shifted your programs to further benefit the people that you serve, with how you've now built this coalition to band together and be able to service people even more. So I think that's something to really highlight for people who are listening, who are feeling inspired, encouraged, who want to go after things. Do things differently. Don't be afraid to do things differently. Sometimes
Absolutely.
that's what it takes to make the biggest difference.
Very much so. I like that. And if I can interrupt you and touch on
Yeah, of
something,
course.
you probably saw the new branding that we just
Hmm.
recently released, and our fundraising efforts are called Beyond the Box. I speak very often that we're more than a box of food. Um, our new logo is a heart inside an open box, and what I would encourage people is to think outside of the box,
Hmm.
and try never to get inside the box. Whenever
Yep.
you can, stay outside the box and leave it open so that you can fill it. And I know that's metaphorical, but the point of it is that business as usual isn't always the most successful or the most beneficial. And we are
Absolutely.
in a time across the boards, economically, socially, politically. We're still going through a lot of turmoil as a country, trying to identify where do we fit in again after COVID? What is my place? Where's my involvement? The world really needs those that say, that has a place, but I've got this new idea I want to push against. And you'll be surprised how quickly people are willing to adapt some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for interrupting me to share that actually, because I think that that was really important. Uh, one other thing before I get into my final couple of questions. At the very beginning, you talked about how every single year you take a weekend off and you go and set goals. How did that come about? And do you have a process that you follow when you are doing that goal setting? Because I love that. At Summit Chasers, our very first thing that we focus on, our first pillar is start with you, and it's personal development. So the
Mm.
fact that you said that, I was like, yes, yes, yes. Tell me more.
Um, it kind of started on two levels. The first time I did it, I was 16. Second time I did it, I was 19, and then I've never stopped. I am an Eagle Scout. I was in the Boy Scouts in a time. I'm old, so it was a different time. Eagle Scouts was very much about leadership and growth and
Hmm.
expanding you as a human and your place and your responsibilities in the world. Within that, I was able to be a part of the leadership development groups and help write a lot of the leadership for boys and for troop leaders and things like that.
Oh,
And
cool.
obviously, one of the big ones we're going to focus on is goals and objectives. So I kind of
Hmm.
came by it naturally at that time, began to see that when you were specific and you wrote it down, number one, you were accountable to it, it was measurable, and it was more, for me, it became more visible. I'm very
Hmm.
much a visionary, and yet those goals give me the ability to also execute because I can measure it.
Yeah.
As I got older, I'm constantly reading, constantly growing. Most of my mentors, I would say, came out of books. I didn't have them one on one. I went and found them in what they wrote, and it was a prevailing theme: is write down your thoughts, write down your goals, and
Hmm.
make them specific, and then make them how you're going to do it. It's one thing to say, I want to make $1 million. That's my goal. Bye. You won't
Right.
make it. But
Right.
if you say, I want to make $1 million by this time, and here's where I am now, and these
Yep.
are the steps. So that's
Yep.
that's where it morphed over time for me. Most of the time I hinted at, I came back with 8 or 10 pages of goals and things I
Yeah.
was writing. I like breaking them up. I have one for health. I have one for
Hmm.
family. I have one for business. I have one for, so that I can be very specific of what those goals are. um, I purposely go away to where I can't be disturbed. My phone
Yeah.
doesn't work. Of course, for a long time, I didn't have to worry about it. But now, my phone doesn't work. I'm not taking a computer. I always take a book that I'm working through.
Hmm.
And as I said, I'm a man of faith. I'm spending a lot of time quiet. I'm
Hmm.
spending a lot of time hiking and walking and sitting on a shoreline and just being quiet, allowing the Lord to speak to me, to give me those visions, to give me ideas, and then to start working through them. But I really believe if you never find time to be quiet, your ideas and your visions can't get through the noise. That's personal belief, but that's how I function.
I really like that a lot. I feel like I need to spend more time being quiet.
really, really
Truly.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just being, I
There's a
feel,
lot of old sayings, there's sayings that um, the greatest cargoes in life come in on quiet seas. They don't bring
mm,
container ships into a harbor in a storm. They
right.
wait until the sea's calm. There's just a lot of wisdom in those type of things. Is silence allows you to hear other things. We all have so much noise, right?
Yeah.
Even as you and I are sitting here, I've got staff coming to the door. My phone is buzzing with whatever else, right?
Yep.
All these things that are constantly coming at us. There's a place where I believe, whether you believe in a faith or karma or the universe, go with what your belief is, but understand they all have the same belief, is that
Mm-hmm.
ideas and vision comes through quiet and silence.
Yep. I absolutely need more of that. I'm one of those that's like, if I'm working on something, I usually have music on, or
Mm.
if I'm just chilling, I'll be reading a book or maybe watching a show. So I don't ever actually allow myself to just sit in silence. And I think that also it helps, like you said, to get into nature or go sit somewhere that's really beautiful and peaceful to you, rather than trying to do it maybe in your office or in your room. Get into a completely different environment, kind of clear your head of the normal
Yeah,
daily stressors and noise and background, whatever you have going
that's right.
on, to
Yeah.
allow yourself to do that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's something that I'm going to work on implementing for myself. Final couple of
It works well.
questions.
It really
Yeah.
does. The staff must worry because if I'm out walking the building and they've seen me go by twice, they know
Yeah.
I'm working through something. So usually
I
means
love
more
it.
work is coming. So
Right, right. They're like, great, what's he up to? What do we have
yeah.
to do now? What pivot are we making? What is the impact that you want to have made when you're gone?
Wow, that's a great question. I think all leaders need to make sure that they're replaceable.
Mm,
And so I believe that one of the, and particularly and again, this is my belief system. If I've been tasked to steward Streetwise, then I believe part of that stewardship is it's got to be ready to transition in the case of the hit by a bus, or it's time for me to go, whatever it may be. I think one of the greatest legacies and gifts you will give an organization is for the leader to have prepared for the next person and make it
hmm
as easy a transition for them. I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges for anybody, it was for me, is coming after a founder or coming
Yeah.
after the owner, the originator, because they'd had a vision and they had a direction it was going to go.
hmm
And you want to be very purposeful,
Yep.
and you want that legacy to live on, but you also know that you're in the next chapter. You're not in a new chapter. It's still called
Right.
Streetwise, but we're in the next chapter, and I need to have the next chapter ready for the next person. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. Um, the other thing I would say is that I would love for us to be the beacon on the hill in the region or in wherever God says it needs to go, but allow us to be an example, allow us to have broken ground, done the hard work, figured out procedures or policies or programs, or if nothing else, mindset that allows someone to say they've been able to do it, they grew into it,
hmm
and I can. There's
Yep.
that old saying, someone said, oh, wow, Streetwise just was an overnight success. And I said, yeah, it took us 35 years, 7 months, and 3 days to be
Yep.
an overnight success.
Right.
Um, but I'd love to be that beacon on the hill, so to speak, that people look to it and go, they did, I
hmm
can.
I love that. And then what summit are you currently chasing?
The ones I can talk about,
Yeah.
part of it is still what we've been working on is the organization, the business of Streetwise.
hmm
There's a misnomer out there that people say nonprofit. You're a nonprofit business. Well, one of the first things that you will learn is that nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. We are
Right.
still a business. from the level of Streetwise. If you factor in our in-kind donations and our organizational budget and all of that, we're going to push a $9 million business with the volunteers that we have that worked 40,000 hours last year. We have roughly 100 employees. If you factor that in, you have to manage this as a business. And so we are still working on that. We are strengthening the systems and the technologies and the procedures so that we are solid, again, so we can transfer it to the next leadership, but more so we can transfer it to the next satellite location, which is probably high up my list of those things, is where are areas of need that make sense for Streetwise to go, not to disrupt and get and move out people that are doing great work. Where can we go that no one's doing the work? What's the area, the county, the area, and we want to make sure that we do that as purposeful and as intentionally and with excellence that we try to do here in Lawrenceville.
That's amazing. I wish you the absolute best of luck with that too, because it is so needed. Tracy, tell everybody where they can find you and Streetwise and how they can best support you.
Absolutely. Streetwise, you can go any number of places. Go to Streetwise Georgia, gets you to LinkedIn and Facebook, YouTube. We've got a lot of videos and training videos and things there. Our website is streetwisegeorgia.org, O-R-G. And you can find me through there. You're also welcome to email me directly. Love to answer questions, love to learn. If you've got suggestions and say, hey, I like what you're doing, but you're way off base, I got an idea, please let me know. And that's at Tracy, Tracy.Joseph at Streetwise Georgia, and you spell out Georgia.org. Tracy.Joseph at streetwisegeorgia.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I will link everything in the description box as well. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such an honor. And thank you. What great questions. Made me think.
And that wraps up another episode of Voices of Impact. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you found value in our conversation, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more inspiring stories and actionable advice, make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, we would love to hear your thoughts and takeaways, so please leave us a comment below. And remember, no matter where you are on your journey, you have the power to climb higher and chase your summit. Until next time, Summit Chasers, keep pushing forward and stay inspired.